Hello and welcome to PocketGamer.biz's weekly news roundup. This is for the week ending 28th of November 2014. Hi, I'm John Jordan. So this week, I guess a quiet week for news to a degree that America was on holiday. It's kind of Thanksgiving week followed by the mass crazy sales of Black Friday. Not really a news week where stuff was kind of leaping out at us, but kind of a few interesting things I think, kind of trend-wise may kind of come through in the future. I mean, a few kind of investment kind of issues. So there's a company called SimilarWeb, who Israeli company, analytics company, pretty big in terms of website analysis and looking at size of websites and looking at kind of how websites are kind of gaining traffic. As an open platform. Obviously, kind of on the mobile app side, we've kind of had this with companies like App Annie and Distimo, who App Annie bought Distimo, so kind of consolidated there. So App Annie have kind of been ruling that market pretty much for the last kind of 6 months or so. Now SimilarWeb are kind of getting into that market, so they've raised this $15 million, and their whole point now is to push into app analysis. And actually, I've been kind of using having a look at how the system works. Pretty interesting, actually. So, in terms of like the App Store stuff, that's fairly standard. Anyone can scrape the App Store or Google Play and kind of tell you kind of who's in what position and where they were like yesterday. What kind of SimilarWeb has done on web and is doing on mobile is has basically a survey system. So it's kind of surveying people. It's also looking at kind of data from ISPs, and so it's kind of getting a better view of kind of where traffic's coming from. So it kind of looks to see kind of how when people are coming to an app store, what kind of channels they're coming through. So were they just going to the app store and searching from the app store, or were they kind of were they searching through Google, or were they going through direct traffic from websites, or how was that kind of stuff happening? Obviously, that's to a degree quite, you're kind of like making a survey, making an estimate, and then kind of scaling that up. So at the moment, some obviously markets like the US market is sort of a big market and quite easy to kind of estimate what's going on there. Some smaller markets, obviously, you need a bit more experience to build that up. So that's kind of where they're getting this money to kind of scale that up. So that'll be interesting to see. I think when people get access to that, you can kind of get an idea of how people are driving traffic. Is it because they got featured on the App Store? Is it because, say, like Rovio, they have quite strong organic traffic themselves that they can point at different things, or is it a more viral thing? Maybe like a Flappy Bird didn't really have anyone promoting it; it just kind of happened. So I think that's kind of data's always good. Everyone says, kind of show us the data. So another source of data, and we'll be doing some stuff on that on PocketGamer.biz. Kind of other news. So for us at Pocket Gamer, the big thing we're scaling up for now is our Pocket Gamer Connects London conference. That's happening in January next year. So that's the 13th and 14th of January in London at Vinopolis, which is the same venue we had it at last year. So on the site now, we're starting to do our speaker spotlight. So that's basically looking at people who are speaking at the show and kind of getting an idea about what kind of things they're interested in, what they're going to be talking about. And also you'll probably start to see, you should see already, we're kind of talking about reasons to go to the conference, and we were talking about this week about our kind of user acquisition, monetization, and acquiring and engaging kind of users. That's a specific track. So there's various different tracks of Pocket Gamer. We have like a business type track, which is kind of East meets West, looking at how Eastern developers are going to Western markets and Western developers are going to Eastern markets, and that kind of like global distribution issue. We have a kind of more what we call it kind of indie rock star track. We're looking at indies. We have the best of British, again kind of focusing on kind of British developers. We have some education track, having an investment track, having a big indie pitch. So in this case, it's a very big indie pitch. So we're going to have sort of 40, 50 teams going into that. That's all happening over the 13th and 14th of January. So definitely check that out. Tickets will be kind of going up at the start of next year. So probably worth checking that out now. And there's some kind of codes floating around the internet that you can probably get hold of and get it a bit cheaper even. So that's one thing. Kind of what else was going on? So there's a few kind of interesting launches going on. It's getting to that time of Christmas when people are launching big games, and I guess King got in a bit early, not quite into December yet, but they launched Candy Crush Saga Soda. So kind of a reimagining, I guess. Is the best way of putting it. I guess even really a sequel to Candy Crush Saga. So it's kind of it's like same basic match 3 mechanics, obviously, but slightly different kind of not really meta gameplay, but kind of what you're doing to kind of match, and then how that's affecting the grid, and you've got kind of bubbly soda coming up from the bottom, and these crazy fish are kind of eating stuff, and but you know, you kind of imagine what that's going on with. And they were talking about obviously Facebook is a really big user acquisition tool for the industry. It has been pretty much for the whole of this year. That's been the big change in user acquisition in 2014. Depending on the territory you're looking at, but Facebook is basically a third of all user acquisition spending on games is basically going through Facebook at the moment. And obviously King has its whole history of being quite a strong Facebook developer, publisher, and then going to mobile, and then using the power of Facebook Connect, so you see where your friends are on their Saga games. So they put out a press release saying within day one of Candy Crush Saga Soda going live, they'd the video they have a series of videos they're going to put out for the promotional videos, and the first one got 100 million, or it was kind of a slightly ambiguously kind of phrased, but it was seen in 100 million Facebook feeds. So not to say that 100 million people clicked on that video, but in terms of it being something that they scrolled across in their feed. And the game has actually gone, maybe not through that reason, but obviously Candy Crush being a $1 billion franchise at the moment, the game has gone straight into the top 5, top grossing pretty much everywhere in the world, certainly in the US and in the EU 5 countries that we've been looking at. So that's, I guess, showing the power of user acquisition still there on Facebook. And we're kind of getting to that stage as well at Christmas, and it had it a bit with the Black Friday stuff, that Tapjoy were promoting the games that gave you double experience if you were incentivized through the Tapjoy program. That's kind of interesting for us, because it shows us as journalists kind of who's spending big on promotional money. That kind of means we can get to see a little bit behind the scenes about which games are clearly doing well, and they're not necessarily the big games. They're kind of some games we've heard of, some games maybe a bit more obscure, but clearly their publishers are happy to spend over the odds a little bit to make sure that they're kind of gaining users at the rate of knots they need. And clearly the problem you kind of have when you have a successful game is you want to get as many users as you can, because you know you can monetize them very well, so you're happy to spend more. And this is why you have this user acquisition kind of inflation, because if I know I can get $2 out of every player I can get to download my game, then I'm happy to spend effectively $1.99 to get those users. And so you kind of have this inflation going on where kind of the lower monetizing games are priced out of the market, because the guys with the most monetizing games, which has been the likes of kind of King and in the past Zynga and Supercell, they can spend money, they get more money back from those users, they can then spend more and more money, so the price goes up and up and up, and that kind of destroys, that kind of, it really saturates the user acquisition channels for everyone else, which is a big problem, which I'm sure we'll talk about at Pocket Gamer Connects London. But a few other things as well. So kind of my little kind of not really I don't know, my little thing I like to do. I have my Mavens group. We have several Mavens groups. I have the Monetizer Mavens, and they kind of are kind of all free to play game design experts. And I kind of posed them a question recently about. I didn't even know the phrase, so it shows I'm not a free-to-play game designer, I suppose. But in games like Farmville, where you kind of plant your crops, and then if you don't come back fast enough, they've all kind of you can't harvest them anymore. They've all turned to dust effectively. And I was playing a game where that kind of mechanic was being used, and I was quite surprised, because I would call that an old school mechanic that was used in Farmville 1, but not Farmville 2. And it seemed to be, it's very frustrating, and so they were kind of debating kind of this, and it's, of course, I know now, it's called wither, the mechanic is called wither, your crops are withering. And it's kind of interesting, so different people have different views on whether it's a good mechanic, or some people say you're not really using it to monetize people, or you can get them to come back to the game, you're kind of using it to just almost as a kind of a maximizing issue, so people just can't increase their resources over and over again. And to a degree, obviously, it's withering crops, but in stuff like Clash of Clans or games like that, your mines or your mana wells or stuff, they will only be a certain amount of resources over time, and if you don't come back and collect them, they don't wither. But it's kind of limiting how much you can get, so kind of forcing that kind of retention. And also the other point was being raised, I was talking about daily bonuses, which people are using, and as much more intelligent people than me pointed out that the wither and daily bonuses are not the same thing. They're not the same thing at all. They're kind of driving different kind of user kind of usage cases almost. So that's kind of interesting. I always like talking to people who know more than me, which is pretty much everyone. I certainly get a bit more intelligent out of it by reading their thing, and that was a good Monetizer Maven. So check that out on the site for Wither. And I guess a sad point to end this week's kind of digest. So after 8 years of working with Pocket Gamer, our one-time editor and contributing editor at the moment, Keith Andrew, has left to try other things. So he's doing a bit of journalism and a bit of PR, and kind of finding there's other things than writing for PocketGamer.biz all the time, which is sad. We've got a little tear in our eye. But yeah, good luck to Keith in what he does, and maybe we'll persuade him to write for us again in the future. So that's all the news this week. Catch you next week.